Greetings. This is transition. This is the genetic section. This is the short version, as opposed to the long version, which is also on the website, on another page. Now, I've said that the reason I created this was because we have these genetic problems coming. We've removed, what we call human progress is to remove natural selection. That's a disaster. We're going to have problems with disease, partly because we always have, and partly because there's a lot more people and they travel around. And antibiotic resistance, that was developed, recognized shortly after they developed antibiotics. And we need a new ecology. I mean, that's the basic problem. The hunter-gatherer ecology we came from is long gone. The farming civil ecology we've been going through, that's transient. It's not stable. I mean, 300 years ago, we started replacing muscle power with machine power. Now we've got the computers. I mean, the changes are amazing. And we've got to adapt to this. As I've said, it's both genetically and behaviorally. But I really started this by looking at the genetic adaptation and how we could do it. That's what I'm good at. So this section is how can humans adapt genetically? And we have to husband our genes. Now, I researched this for 10 years, pretty much, before I said the only chance for survival for humans is to use artificial selection. We could survive as animals without it, but if you want to stay civilized, if you want technology, if you want to be human, we have to introduce artificial selection, because part of being human is removing natural selection. That's what we call human progress. Now, I could go into the technology of this and the theoretical points, but really, as soon as I say that, I have to go into the moral discussion, because you can judge this with your reason and logic and judge the science, but you're going to judge this with much older instincts than your intellect. You're going to judge this with your moral instinct, and so that's what I have to address first. Now, this is addressed in much greater detail in the longer section, but to put it in a nutshell, this is about healthy children, healthy families, healthy communities, and healthy societies, which is the basis of morality. So this is moral. Now, we don't have a choice if we want to survive. Survival is another basis of morality. But I'll also add that if you are more comfortable with your moralities being directed by religious concerns, I discuss that in detail later on, and it makes sense in that context too. That's just the way it is. It makes sense. Now, what we have to do is you select against the bad genes. You select for the good genes. I call that the first two levels of artificial selection. There's not a lot of bad genes because evolution got rid of those. I mean, if you're a survivor, it's because your parents never lost the game of survival. Now, there are some bad genes, the broken ones. I've mentioned genetic load breaks gene. There's also genes that have been introduced by viruses, and they can cause some really strange diseases. We don't need those. Those don't serve us any. But there's some genes like sickle cell that are survival traits in some respects, but in other circumstances they're dangerous. So you want to remove those. But you mostly want to select for good genes. You want to replace the genes that are cancer prone, heart disease, all the mental weaknesses, schizophrenia, I'm not giving a good description of that, but there's all these mental pathologies that are genetically based mostly, and they can be removed. And I'll ask you, what would be the value of that? Artificial selection, we already know how to do it. It's being done. This was pie-in-the-sky technology when I talked about it originally, or when I thought of it 25 years ago. But this is current technology that they're using to prevent early onset Alzheimer's and diabetes. And it's not that expensive. You're talking a couple $1,000s. what would be the value of it monetarily compared to heart disease or cancer? And you can remove these. Now, one of the other, speaking about moral issues about it, a lot of people, when that have considered this idea before, oh, it's going to be for the elite. No, we're all human. We're all subject to the same evolutionary effects. You're going to have to introduce a selective effect, unless you want to have some slave class of animal, which I don't recommend, and there's reasons why. Indications are it can't happen. It doesn't work. It's sort of been tried. And the other moral aspect of it is that those who have the least have the most to gain. You take a person with an IQ of 150, well, yes, you can improve it, but how much? Take a person with an IQ of 80, well, you can bump that up to 130, 150 a lot easier than you can bump a person with an IQ from 150 to 200, whatever. I think you'll understand. Those who have the least have the most to gain. I think that's a nice moral position to take. Now, admittedly, if everybody had health, beauty, and brain, it'd cause some other problems, and some of them would be very interesting. But I think we can deal with those easier. Now, the third thing, and this is what came from Darlington too, is that, as I say, that a lot of this is about the hybrid. And the idea is that we come from different tribes and different castes, and we have different potentials. Well, using artificial selection, you can work to ensure, without a lot of natural selection like has happened in history, that the children get the potentials of both the parents. I mean, you think of it, a scribe and a builder, if you put those talents together, maybe you get an engineer. Or you put together a warrior and a priest, and you get someone who can be a philosopher. Something like that. But the point is really, in the future, to reach a new ecology, we're going to need all the adaptability we can get. It raises interesting questions of free will and some other philosophical nonsense. So the point of this all is that we have a genetic disaster coming. For one, from behind us. Two, we need to adapt to a new ecology, genetically and behaviorally. The only way we're going to pull this off is genetically, using artificial selection. And not only is it moral by any standard, which I discuss more later, but the potentials are even beyond what you would think of right away. I mean, I'm talking about people that have incredible health, people that are mentally variable and very comfortable, people that don't get cancer and don't get heart disease. Everyone's beautiful, which is going to really confuse things. And so that is the genetic section of this. As I say, in the longer, more detailed version, there's a great deal more detail about this. The rule of it is keep it balanced. Don't ever do something for fashion. Don't ever try for extreme. Yes, this is a very dangerous technology, so be careful using it. There are a couple rules I figured out. One is obvious. The decision should be made by the parents. I'm not positive how this is going to work in the long run, but disinterested parties should stay disinterested. Decisions about what the future might be of a family should be made by the parents. Now, we will follow some of the normal patterns of hybridization and backcrossing. A lot of this stuff is known. A lot of it will be learned. People will come up with multi-generational selection patterns. I've written about this elsewhere. The only other rule I can think of is that a parent should not be allowed to decide that their children should inherit a quote defective gene that they did not inherit. Meaning, if some of their genes were broken in their generation, you don't want to pass that on if you can avoid it. The next section is morality. We do have to adapt behaviorally, and we need a new foundation for our survival strategy. We can't go on with these survival strategies based upon authority and precedent. We need a survival strategies based upon reason and logic. That's the next video. Thank you very much.